Okay, everyone, thank you all for waiting while we just worked out some technical difficulties there. Welcome to today's live webinar presented by SCORE Fairfield County, which is sponsored by First County Bank. Today's topic is how to develop a business plan in 6 easy steps. Today's speaker is John Harmon, and I'm Mike Clem, a business mentor at SCORE Fairfield County. Let me provide you some brief information about SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide organization including over 11,000 volunteers with more than 300 offices around the country, providing free advice to small business owners. SCORE Fairfield County is comprised of more than 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. We offer the 3 services to small business owners, all of which are free. Please go to our website at fairfieldcounty.score.org to learn more about them and to sign up for free one-on-one business counseling. As I mentioned earlier, today's webinar is sponsored by First County Bank. First County Bank has been a long time and generous supporter of SCORE Fairfield County. Joining us today from First County Bank is Singh. Welcome, Singh. Thank you for joining us today, and to First County Bank for sponsoring today's webinar. Could you please say a few words, Singh?
Absolutely. Can you guys see me? I'm trying to start my video. It's not letting me start it. I want to make sure I'm visible. All right, there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. And as always, we're very pleased to partner up with SCORE. You guys do a tremendous job within Fairfield County and actually all over the state. We're always there to partner up and assist any way we can. So to give you a little bit of information about First County Bank, what do? We are a mutual bank. We have been around for 170 years now. So we're not traded on the market. We don't pay dividends to anyone. We do have a foundation set up in place. So after all of our expenses are done, we take the profits and we share within our community. Our footprint is Lower Fairfield County, starting from Greenwich all the way down to Fairfield and Bridgeport area. And we have a total of 16 branches. And we are 1.9 billion in assets. And you guys are going to learn a lot of stuff in this program with SCORE. And the only recommendation I would like to give you guys is that make sure you guys have a dedicated personal banker. Work with your local community bank. And I always tell all my clients, make sure you guys have 3 partners when you're going into business. One is your banker, the second is your attorney, third is your CPAs. They're your best assets, along with SCORE, of course. If you have any questions, they're always there to help guide in any way they can. So with further ado, I would like to have you guys kick this off. And my information will be shared. If you guys have any questions, any ideas that you guys want to run by me, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Jay Singh from First County Bank. Thank you so much for having me today.
Okay, thank you, Singh. Appreciate you being with us today. Before we get started, let me provide some useful information about today's webinar. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the chat window at any time. It's located in the lower part of your screen. We'll be monitoring your questions and we'll set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 p.m. today to respect your time. The session is being recorded and the link to the recording will be available at fairfieldcounty.score.org within the next couple of days. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. John Harmon is a SCORE volunteer. He's a managing director of Adulant Consulting Services, which advises small and medium-sized businesses on strategies for growth and operating excellence. John has held senior leadership and executive positions in sales, marketing, quality management, strategic planning, and new business development at Eastman Kodak, the Gartner Group, and Pitney Bowes. I want to particularly thank John for being with us today. John just recently moved, and he's been in the middle of unpacking boxes and setting up internet and fighting with all sorts of things. So thank you, John, very much for being with us today. It's all yours.
Mike, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Well, it's been a bit of a move, but it's a happy move, and so I'm in a good mood, and so ready to continue. Let's talk a little bit about a business plan. There are a second here. So today we're going to discuss what we mean by a business plan, and by the way, depending upon where you are in your development or in your operation of your business plan may mean different things. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. We'll talk about the steps in putting together a business plan. We're talking about how you analyze your progress with respect to that plan, and also a closing challenge. It's pretty simple, and that is get to work. So what's a business plan? And I'll start off by saying that most businesses, most clients of SCORE, most people who are in or starting a small business are in what we call a mature industry, which means the industry's been around. The businesses in those industries have been around, so that what they offer, whether it's in retail or in consulting services or in legal services or whatever, tend to be more or less doing the same thing and more or less charging the same thing, depending upon the quality of what you deliver. What's the point of all this? The point is that as you enter these businesses, as you enter these industries, your strategy is going to be basically taking share from somebody else. You're not going to be growing a new market like Google. You're going to be in a business that's been around, and you're going to have to compete with other businesses. So the business plan, given the context of being in a mature business, mature market, you need to understand what your goals are. Some of these will be quantitative. Certainly, they must be quantitative, but they also may be personal, which is to say, why am I in business? Am I in business to just keep busy on the weekend? Am I in business to make millions of dollars, or somewhere in between? Once you've set your objectives and once you've identified quantitatively what those objectives look like, your next step is to say, well, okay, so how am I going to reach these objectives? What am I going to do? Who's going to do it? When am I going to do it? And at what cost? And all of this then, once combined, you're going to be putting together metrics for your progress. I will say that most of you may not be in a position to write an entire plan. Sorry. What you may want to do is to write a portion of the plan that's relevant to your particular circumstances. That's why we make these into steps. Some of you may only be working on the first step. Some of you may be able to work through all 6 steps, but figure out where you are and only do the work you need to do for a particular point in your business development. And here are the steps. So you have to analyze your market. Where are you? Who are your competitors? You define your marketing position. What is it I do? What are my sales and earnings goals? For those of you who are just starting out, this is a tremendously difficult thing to do because it's guesswork. But it's better to try to make some kind of an estimate of where you think you might be in a year or 2 or 3, and then adjust as you get more experience, than to do nothing at all. Once you have your targets, you have to figure out what your action plan is. What am I going to do to achieve these targets? How am I going to measure my progress? And that's called a P&L, a profit and loss statement, or an income statement. We'll give you examples of what that looks like. And then some kind of a cash flow. By the way, I'll get into some more detail. P&Ls, profit and loss statements, are usually different from a cash flow projection. And we'll get into why that is the case. So step 1, market data. What market am I in? And how big is it? And is it growing? Now, you may not be able to do the research to necessarily know that your market it consists of X number of customers or Y number of competitors, but you may have some sense of what the market size is. If you are a landscaping business, you probably have some idea of how many customers there are in a particular geography. If you're selling jewelry, you may have some idea of the number of people in your area that might be interested in jewelry. You may know the number of jewelry stores. You may know the number of landscapes. You may know the number of plumbers or service accountants, lawyers, whatever. You may have some sense of what that size looks like, and you may have some sense of what the growth options are. I will tell you that most people in mature businesses, the growth comes with a growth in demand or market size. And so once you understand that your market is relatively stable, hasn't grown a lot, or it's grown by 1 or 2%, you know that to be successful, you're going to have to take somebody else's business. Understand what the segments are. We'll talk more about what we mean by segments, but basically what that means is that while you are serving one market, you may have different demands within the market. Let's just say that you are in the landscaping business, and you may want to divide your business into people who just want their lawns mowed versus people who want to maintain their shrubbery, or people who might want to help you plant a tree. There are a variety of segments in each market. You got to figure out what segments you're trying to serve and what segments you're going to ignore and what segments you're going to prioritize and what segments might come later. Why do people buy? Certainly they buy quality. Most of us want to buy quality. And yes, we want it at the lowest cost, but some people, some customers are willing to pay a premium for what they perceive as quality. You shouldn't ignore that. And what value does service play? And by service, I don't mean actually doing what you've said you're going to do. Service could very well mean access to customer help desks or billing, reliable and quick billing. It could be a variety of things. And in some markets, service may be a key differentiator. In the construction trade business, particularly home remodeling, how you appear to the buyer, which is usually the one of the spouses, how you appear, are you polite? Are you well dressed? Do you know what you're talking about? Is a big part of that service. It's not just simply doing the job, it's appearing as if you are respectful and listening. Demographics. What are the ages of your various customer sets? What is their gender? What is their wealth position? And how do you differentiate one segment from another based on that? Competitors. Every business has a competitor. I have seen some clients who maintain that they don't have competitors. Nonsense. You have competitors. The question is, who are they? What do they offer? And how do you differentiate yourself from those competitors? What is it you offer to customers in a clear way? And why are you different? Why should people spend money on what you offer versus what competitors offer? Distribution channels. These are the ways in which you both communicate to your customers. It could be the web, it could be a catalog, it could be standing on the street corner, but nonetheless, it's ways you communicate with your potential market. And it also could mean ways in which you deliver against that. Some people, some businesses might deliver entirely through the internet. Others, there might be some kind of a storefront, but there has to be some way of both communicating and delivering, and that's called a distribution channel. There could be seasonality and regionality differences. If you're in the landscaping business, obviously summers are going to be much different than the winters. You're going to have much higher demand. You may also want to differentiate your service so that you are removing snow in the winter and mowing lawns in the summer. you have to figure out what that might look like. And then finally, key marketing drivers. What kinds of exogenous activities going on that will affect your business? The latest and greatest example of that is COVID. COVID-19 caused many businesses to rethink what they deliver to customers and how they deliver it and how long they have to deliver it. It's another example of marketing drivers that may occur outside your control, but which you have to be sensitive to. There are a number of ways you can get this information. The internet is a great way. You can certainly do a Google of competitors, or you can key in certain search criteria and find out what kinds of businesses are there doing what, how big the market is, some of the issues related to that market. Public company reports might be helpful, although they tend to focus on fairly large businesses that may be unrelated to yours, but there could be some things in those reports you could find useful. The library is a great way of finding out information. And by the way, every library has something called an RMA. It is a reference guide that allows you to understand for every business in the United States, for every industry, what the typical revenues and profits are for those businesses. It'll give you an idea of the profitability of these businesses, how big they are, how profitable they are, what assets they have. It's a very valuable resource, and most of the libraries in Fairfield County have the RMA. Government websites. The North American Industrial Commercial System is a government constructed system which applies numbers to every industry and every business. And you can go through that and understand what kind of businesses there are and how that might pertain to your business. You can get that by going to the Department of Census, government.org. Trade associations and shows are another great way to get information. And every trade association has a trade publication that you can understand what's going on in the industry, some of the issues, some of the trends, and also some of the competitors. Market research is sort of a general category, but it could mean as little as driving around to see if you're opening a restaurant. Well, what restaurants are nearby? Where are they located? Are they located in a convenient or inconvenient spot? And what does this mean in terms of what you might want to do and where you might want to open? So really important market data. A subset of that is competitor data. And it's really important that you understand your competitors, not because you want to emulate them or copy what they do. You want to start from what they do, and you want to expand on that to figure out what it is you can do that differentiate yourself from the competitors. What customers do these competitors target? What are their product range and features? You could very well find out, or at least assume what price structure there might be and the quality. What's their sales pitch? What do they say about themselves? Why do they and what do they say that convinces you or anybody else that what they offer is worth investigating? Gives you an idea of size and profitability, marketing strategies, sales and channel strategies. All these things are very useful for you to understand what you ought to be doing. And the data sources are similar to what we earlier talked about in the market analysis. This is a tool that I will talk about, but I'll also let you know that it needs to be done carefully. It's not a tool for everybody. And this is called a SWOT, where you look at your internal business, your own business, and assess its strengths and weaknesses. And you look at the external worlds and what the opportunities and threats that they pose. The reason why it's good is it helps you understand and review what some of the elements, the pieces and parts of your business are, and what some of the things are out there that could very well affect your business. The problem is if it's just you, you're likely to be relatively narrow in your view. If you can do it with somebody else who's been in the business, can help you with this, great. Otherwise, I wouldn't spend too much time. This might be a good tool for those of you who are in business and may want to look at your business through a different set of eyes. So an example of a strength might very well be your unique offering or the intellectual property you hold. Maybe you have a low cost position, not so low cost that you can't make money, but you are highly efficient at what you do, and therefore you can charge a lower price. And among all these strengths, there are certain ones that are much more important, at least strategically important for the near term than others. And the question is, well, what are they? So you start with a grab bag list of strengths. You identify those strengths that pertain to you. And the same thing, weaknesses. It could be that you have a cash flow position that is weak. And the question is, well, how do you improve that? It could very well be that you get better at collecting receivables from customers. Opportunities, we've talked about market trends and what that might mean. In some businesses, there is a relatively low entry barrier. A good example of that is website design. It's very easy for somebody to graduate from the Rhode Island Institute of Design out with some ability to create a web, willing to work in their basement for chocolate chip cookies and sodas and charge a very low price. And there's lots of these people coming in. The question is, well, who's coming in, and what does this churn might mean for you? On the threats, we already mentioned COVID as a threat. New competitors are always a threat, but understanding what these opportunities and threats are may help you formulate a strategy for how you get started and how you conduct your business. So this is a worksheet. Now, there are copies of this worksheet. I haven't talked to our producers about this, but I think if you were to just let them know you'd be interested in all these worksheets, they could get them to you. But this is an example. This worksheet takes all of those previous slides and puts them into relatively a small list of things that you want to focus on and concentrate on. It helps you understand where you are now and where you need to go. So that's the analyzing your market position. You also want to define what it is that you're going to do in this market. How are you going to make yourself into something that people want to buy? And this is a relatively old way of looking at it, but it's still true. The 5 Ps. So positioning. How do you position yourself against your competition? It could be that in the pizza business, I'm making this up, in the pizza business, your advantage is that you can get pizzas, hot pizzas, to people as quickly as possible. Or you offer a very high quality pizza compared to your competitors. If you are in the service business, it may be that your knowledge of the industry is superior, or you focus in on a particular element of that industry, like supply chain, or the legal aspects of running a business, or accounting, something there that allows you to differentiate yourself from your competition. What is it? What do you offer? One of the things I find in new businesses is not a lot of them, but some, is defining their product or service in a way that people can understand. This is mostly true in consulting businesses, knowledge businesses, where you are offering some kind of a service, knowledge service. Understanding what that is can sometimes be difficult if you're not crystal clear on explaining it. So what's your business? What's your service? What's your pricing? Pricing is probably the most difficult thing that any business can do. So don't feel bad if you're not quite sure how to price. Every business annually, or even more frequently, goes through some analysis of whether their prices are too high or too low. Maybe they're too low, in which case you could be getting more from your money, or too high, in which case you're losing business. Whatever it is, understand that it's a bit of a test to come up with the right price. The only thing I'll say in addition to this is that many small businesses price themselves too low, figuring that that's a way to get customers. It's a way to get customers, probably the wrong customers. You need to make money. You need to charge some kind of a premium, whether it's pennies or dollars. So don't be afraid to price something at what you might consider to be a bit high. You can always come down. It's very hard to go up. Place is your distribution channels. How are you reaching customers? And how are you delivering what you promise to customers? And then promotion. A lot of people think that marketing is promotion. It's much more than that, as I pointed out. But this includes things like advertising, social media, search engine optimization, word of mouth, which is often ignored, but a very useful way of getting your word out there, because it's very cheap and you can utilize it in ways that can advantage you without having to spend a lot of money. So those are the 5 Ps. This is a little bit more detail on your positioning. Who are you serving? What's their age? What's their ethnicity? Where are they located? What kind of benefits are they looking for? What kind of lifestyle do they lead? It could be that you find certain customers want the best. They are willing to pay for the best. If you are in the construction business, you'll know that there are certain customers who want to build or renovate multi-million-dollar houses, and they are willing to pay a premium. So is that who you're serving? Or are you serving people who just want their roof changed, rebuilt? But understand what those lifestyle and user preferences are and how that affects what you offer. Psychographics is just a simple way, or a fancy way of finding out why people buy, what motivates them to buy. And as I've mentioned, it could be that all they want is low price, in which case, in most cases, you want to avoid those. It could be that they want the very best, in which case they're willing to pay a premium. But what's the psychological profile of people? Why do they buy what they buy? And then finally, what industry am I in? What partners do I want to seek out? If I am in the consulting business, offering knowledge to small businesses about how they optimize their supply chain, I may want to have partners like lawyers or accountants so that I can refer my customers to, or I can make them part of my team. But understanding what the industry looks like, who your partners are going to be, what those distribution channels are, is a part of your market segmentation. We've already talked a little bit about this. What makes your business different? Is it quality? Is it service? What is it? And this is something that's probably related more to existing businesses, although it's something that new businesses need to think more about. It's prioritizing the kinds of customers that you are seeking. So there's such a thing as growth customers. Those are customers are in markets that are growing. Either the overall market is growing or customers within that market are growing, and they are willing to pay a premium. Those are great customers to have. You, as a new business, you're probably not going to be able to start out appealing to those growth customers, but that's your goal. There are bread and butter customers. There are customers who will come to you because they like you, they've been happy with you in the past, You probably don't have to spend a lot of money marketing to these customers because they're coming anyway through word of mouth or through their own experience with you. There are also what I call stepping stone customers. These are customers that you want to start with, who will eventually may allow you to achieve either a bread and butter status or a growth status. A good example might be in the construction industry, somebody who is sort of a handy person. They go in, they fix windows, they repair doors or whatever. That would be a stepping stone toward increasing the scope of your business to go all the way up to room or housing renovation. Those are probably much better customers, but you got to start somewhere. There's also gap fillers, which is to say customers who may want your service a particular month or season of the year. The question is, well, how do you satisfy those? When do you satisfy them? And then, I've mentioned this before, there are some I call undesirable customers. These are customers that complain about price, who complain about your service, who it's difficult to satisfy. You may have to start out with these customers and they may not reveal themselves to you once you start with them. But over time, you'll find that these customers are too expensive to please. They take too much time and they're taking time away from servicing other customers. Recognize that every business has undesirable customers. New businesses don't know who they are until they learn more, but recognize that you're trying to fill the customers that are within that target area. So here's a worksheet on positioning your company. What's my target? Who are they? What do I offer? Who are my competitors? And why am I better than anybody else? By the way, this may be step one. If you're just starting your business, this may be the only step you work on. Don't work on anything else, but you start here. And it could be that you are spending the first month or so of starting your business doing nothing more than market research. And it's very valuable to spend time on. Else, you'll be waving your arms, running around, serving all sorts of things for all sorts of purposes and wasting your time and money. So understand who you're trying to do it to serve and why you're doing that. So once you've defined your marketing position, the next thing is to get much more specific about what your goals are. What revenues do I want to earn over the next 3 years? What is my profitability expectation? It could be that you don't know. As a matter of fact, when you're just starting out, you probably don't. But you can guess. And an easy way to do that would be say, okay, if I want to achieve a first year revenue of $100,000, the question is, well, how many customers would it take for me to reach $100,000? And how much would they have to buy to reach $100,000? And you'll probably be wrong when you first start out, but you'll learn how to get much more accurate assessment in this analysis. But not doing it means that you'll never know. Once you identify your goals, and we'll get into examples of this in a minute or two, you put together an action plan. What is it I'm going to do in order to achieve these goals? What does a P&L look like? And what does my cash position look like? The P&L and the cash flow are projections, they're guesses, but it's your first guess. And as long as you have a first guess, then you can modify that first guess into an even better second guess and an even better third guess. You'll get better and better at projecting what your profit and loss is and what your cash flow expectation should be. So here's an example of a projection. And I touched on this a little bit. So if I look out through the year and I'm guessing, if I'm just starting out, I probably don't expect any sales in the first few months because I'm still marketing. I'm still letting people know I exist. So my sales are going to be relatively few in these first few months. Sales being, well, how much am I selling? If I'm in the goods business, like shoes or clothes or something that's tangible, I can count it pretty easily. How many dresses am I going to sell? How many shoes am I going to sell? If I'm in the service business, it may be a little bit more difficult to project out unit of sales. It could be a project. It could be the number of hours that you are estimating a project would take. But somehow you've got to guess what that looks like. You've got to guess what the price of these units are going to be, whether it's service units or widgets or whatever. You have to determine the frequency, and earlier in the year, it's going to be less. Later in the year, it's going to be more. And then you have to figure out what your direct costs are of delivering against these sales. Direct costs are the costs associated with directly making available this service or these goods to your customer. Usually it's in the form of labor to produce and the materials to produce. That's different from indirect costs. I should say that direct costs are also related to a particular transaction. If I sell something and it took me so much labor to produce it and so many materials to produce it, that's going to be direct costs, and it's going to be related to a particular transaction. Indirect costs are not related to transactions. They're general expenses like rent or utilities, something you can't define to a particular sale, but are nonetheless costs, and you need to identify what they are. So you've done your projection. You know you're going to be wrong. You're not exactly sure where you're right, where you're wrong. You're going to learn. At least you've got something to start with. And then you have your action plan. So that consists of doing stuff. What am I going to do? And it's priority. What's the most important thing I need to do? It could be, by the way, that as you're starting out, the most important thing you need to do is to understand your supplier. Who's going to supply me the goods or the materials that I'm going to use to sell my stuff? It could be a competitive analysis. It could be some understanding of how I'm going to fund my business. As great as banks are, they're unlikely to fund a new business that has no history at all in revenues, because you don't know and they don't know, and they just need to be sure that the money they're offering to a customer has a reasonable probability of being returned in the way of monthly payments. So whatever the priority is, the question is who's going to do it. Most people starting a small business, the answer is you. And by when are you going to do it? And what do you think the costs associated with it? In marketing, let's just assume marketing is one of those things that it's important. It's important that you understand the cost of doing that. When you are first starting out, you don't want to spend a lot of money on marketing because you're not quite sure what your message is going to be. You're not quite sure who's going to receive it. You may want to spend more time getting word of mouth going, which costs a lot less than it is to spend a lot of time and money on search engine optimization or digital web advertisements or whatever. But be clear on not just what you're doing, but what it's going to cost. The higher the cost, probably the lower the priority it assumes. But again, all you're trying to do is to identify the things you're trying to do, the priority, when you're going to do them, who's going to do them. These are examples of some of the things in operations that you're going to want to look at in terms of your action plan. It could be who you're going to need to help you sell your stuff. It could be the supply chain. It could be how you're going to make sure that what you deliver is consistently good from sale to sale. It could be an efficient billing and accounts receivable system. I've had some clients who haven't kept good track of their billing and their accounts receivable. Accounts receivable, by the way, is stuff that money that your customers owe you. You've already delivered your service. You've already billed them, but you haven't gotten the payment. And knowing what customers haven't paid and how you're going to follow up to make sure they do is an important part of your operation. Office space, retail location, all these other things, technology management, which often comes down to the use of the web and the use of some of the automated services that come out of the web. It's all a part of what you need to think about. So that's step 4. And the next is a P&L. Now, some of you may not know what a P&L is. What you see here in front of you is an example, a high-level example of what all P&L statements look like. There's a gross sales revenue line. And as I've suggested, you want to make sure that you're tracking not just the revenue, but how many units you've sold or how many hours of service you sold at what price and when. Then you want to determine your cost of goods sold. What does it cost for you to deliver the service or the product that you're offering? The reason it's important that you understand the cost of goods sold is that is the basis of your profitability. And most businesses should target a gross profit of about 50%, which is to say about half of the revenues are going to be going toward cost of goods sold. Now, this is not true for every business. Construction business cost of goods sold is quite high because all the materials are expensive, the equipment is expensive, and the gross profit in construction businesses might be 20%. Retail businesses tend to follow the 50% rule. What you get to sell ought to be half of what you sell, of the price that you sell. In consulting or software, the gross profit is much higher. But in software and consulting, the support services around that, which is an operating expense, are also high. So understanding what your gross profit is important. Understanding what your operating expenses are is important because they all contribute to the bottom line, which is to say your operating income, which is pre-tax. Sometimes it's called EBIT, earnings before interest and taxation, but it's your basic business profitability. Then you take your taxes away from that, and that's what your after-tax profit is. So that's what a P&L looks like. And here's what a cash flow statement looks like. I should say some businesses have revenues, P&Ls, that look like their cash flow because they get cash on demand. As soon as they deliver their service, they get the cash. Grocery stores are an example. Other businesses, however, must bill, in which case, when you deliver your service, let's say you finish a project in January and you bill and you've got payment terms of 30 days, you're not going to get the cash until February or March. And what you're charting here is the cash that you receive, both in terms of sales and in terms of cash outlays. You may buy a desk. That desk may arrive on Tuesday. You get an invoice on Wednesday. You don't pay it until the next month. So while the cost of that will appear on the P&L as a cost, as a cash flow, it won't appear until you've actually paid for it. The bottom line is you want to know what your cash in and cash out is, because you want to know each and every month what cash you have on hand and what you need in order to make up the difference. When you're in business and you have a negative cash flow, the question is, well, how do I make up the cash? And it could come from your savings. It could come from a variety of sources, but the fact is that it will have to be paid. And you need to know what that looks like, how big it is, and whether your cash flow is numbers are increasingly positive. It may be negative, 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 and suddenly you're finding a positive. You want to know if there's seasonality to this. You want to know if in the summer you tend to have a more positive cash flow, and in the winter it tends to be negative. You want everything to even out, and you want to plan for that eventuality as you think about your cash resources and reserves. Having a cash flow statement is key. After all, we're in business. Everyone's in business to make money, and cash is the bottom line. So those are the steps. What you need to do is not just to understand the steps, but figure out where you are in the process. Am I at step 1 and step 2, and I'm not worried about the rest of the steps? Am I in business, and do I have a P&L that's properly projected? How's my cash look? What kind of action plan am I going to put together in order to achieve those objectives? So each and every step comes with it a certain level of activity. Most small businesses, I find, think of a business plan as something they might hand a bank. Fully vetted, fully analyzed, very complete, very informative. And yes, banks want that. And banks will help you put together that. And certainly SCORE helps clients put together a business plan of that type. But often you don't need that level of detail. You want to focus on that element of the business plan process that's most important for you to achieve right now. So you should understand your P&L, your cash flow, your accounts receivable. I already mentioned the importance of that. That's cash on the table that you haven't received, even though you've delivered the service. Your competitive advantage, all your priorities for the action plan, and that's it. I'm sorry I've been racing through this because I wanted to make sure I'm finished on time, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that have appeared.
Okay, thank you very much, John. I do have a couple of questions here, and everybody else has a question, please put that in the chat box by hitting the chat button at the bottom of your screen. John, you talked early on about pricing. One question here is, if I'm a new person in the market, how can I charge as much as an established company in the market? Don't I have to charge a lower price?
That is the one temptation that sometimes sinks small business. If you offer a lower price, you are obligated, if you're going to make money, to have a lower cost structure. You must be able to deliver against that lower price at a lower cost. Often, that's not the case. So you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage in terms of costs early on. That's part of the plan. If I know that I need to charge a price that's going to be profitable, and we've talked about gross margins and the kinds of gross margins you ought to be looking at, you're probably going to be operating at a loss for the first several months. Accept that. Make that a part of your plan. I'm going to lose money. I'm going to lose money for the first 3 or 4 or 5 months. I just need to have enough cash available to afford to lose that money. Don't charge a low price, because you'll end up ultimately serving the wrong customers and never being in a position to make any money.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. Got a few questions about whether this recording will be available. Yes, we'll have it posted on the SCORE-Fairfield County website in just a couple of days, so you'll be able to review this again. As some of you have said, John has presented a lot of information here, and you will be able to, at that point, take screenshots of the various worksheets that John mentioned here, so you'll be able to shoot them and then download them. Another question for you, John, is, first of all, his question is, are you a SCORE mentor? Well, the answer is yes, that works with businesses to build a business plan.
Yes.
Yes. And you are an active SCORE mentor that advises many clients, as a matter of fact.
I am. I do. Often when I first meet a client, I try to understand what their overall objectives are, where they are in the process, and then to end the session with a specific action item and say, here is what I recommend you do. And it could be something as simple as doing a web search of competitors, or going to the library and understanding some of the businesses that are in your geographic area. It could be as simple as that. But we always try to end up with a specific set of tasks for you to complete, and then come back and tell us how you did.
Okay, good. John, another question here from Jamie is, my business has 3 different segments. Do you suggest I create 3 separate business plans or 1 overall plan?
I would suggest you have 1 overall plan. So, and this may not pertain to your business. Most new businesses can differentiate one segment from another. They look different, their needs are different, although you can supply each one of those segments and satisfy each one of those needs. You just don't know what customers might be more interested than others, in which case you find out. And that's part of the plan. I'm going to serve these 3 customers. I'm going to try to find these three different kinds of customers. I'm going to try to serve them, and I'll see what happens. And you could find that a certain kind of customer is much more interested in your service now than another kind of customer. Okay, then that's who you serve. You don't want to ignore the other customers. It could be the other customers are waiting for you to get bigger, or waiting for you to offer services that you could offer, but for your resources. It's possible to serve several segments in a business. You just need to know who's more important at a particular time, what you need to do in order to expand your offering, in order to satisfy more customers. All that ought to be a part of your plan. There's to try to have 3 separate plans for 3 separate segments means you'll get so confused, you'll have no idea who you're delivering against what, and you'll have no idea of how these customers' demands, needs might be satisfied over time.
Okay, great. John, if you don't mind, we might go over a few minutes because we got started a little late here. A couple of questions on pricing. Here's the first one. Is there a given formula for consulting charges if you're a consultant?
Well, I'll throw some numbers out, but I'll tell you that this is a very hard deal. So, as an example, if you're a consultant, you don't want to be offering the $1,000 an hour white shoe legal firm charge. You don't want to do that. So you're probably looking at a range of, say, $100 to $200 an hour if you're just starting out. Might even be a bit lower than that. Accountants, as an example, will charge you $200 an hour at minimum. They might be more. As you get more specialized with differentiated services, you might be able to charge more than that, $300 or $400 an hour, or $1,000 to $2,000 a day. But I throw those numbers out advisedly because it really depends on the uniqueness of your service. It depends on your competitors. It depends on the demand. What I've found is that if you start relatively in the middle, let's just say $100 an hour, let's just say $1,000 a day. If you start there, you'll find the market will either respond or not, in which case your task is to figure out, do I lower my price? And at some, in order to attract the kind of customer I want and later increase my price? Or do I wait until I find customers interested in paying that? It may be hard for you to do that, but I think that's the relative range of pricing for consulting services.
Okay, great. Another pricing question. Mary is selling jewelry, making and selling jewelry, and started with prices too low, silver costs rising quite a bit now. She'd like to know, is it better to try to catch up her pricing all at once or step it up over time?
By the way, that's not a question for you. It's a question for everybody. How do I adjust pricing over time? Especially with the rising costs of materials and labor. There are a couple of ways to do that. You could do it cold turkey and just say, I'm increasing my price. I believe that most customers understand the situation and will pay that higher price. It could be that you keep current customers at a lower price and begin adding new customers at successively higher prices. It's a strategy, and it depends on the kind of customers you have now, the kind of customers you want to attract. The key, however, in doing all this is to make sure that the customers that are enjoying the lower price don't know about the customers who are paying the higher price. Sometimes that's hard to conceal, but you don't want customers to feel that you're taking advantage of them rather than trying to adjust in market demand and the cost of labor and supplies.
Okay, great, John. We have time for one more question. A little bit different question here from Randy. Should a new business ask people that are helping them to sign NDA, non-disclosure agreements, so their idea is not shared before they're ready to start the business?
If you're talking about customers, I think you're talking about customers. I think. If you're talking about partners, that's another matter. Yeah, if you're talking about people who you want to get into business with to deliver a certain product or service, NDAs are important. If you're talking about customers, the answer to that question has to do with what you want to share upfront and what you want to share after the commitment has been made. Sometimes it's tough to decide. How much information do you give a customer to convince them that what you have to offer is worth their purchase? And when do you go over the line and start delivering when they haven't paid for anything? There's a little bit of art to that. Going on the web and just seeing how competitors position their service, they're trying to do the same thing. It may be helpful. Sometimes it's just experience, knowing that, hey, I ended up giving the customer everything and they never pay for anything. Well, at what point do I stop and say, now, Mr. Customer, do you understand what I'm offering? Yes. Do you understand the value it brings to you? Yes. Well, then I wonder if you might consider signing a contract or buying this or whatever, and stop it there. Don't get into the position where you've already delivered what you've promised and they haven't paid for it.
Okay, that's great. John, thank you very much for going a little bit over here for us. And thank you for presenting today. That's all the time we have for questions. As a reminder, a recording of this webinar and the materials are available within a couple of days on the fairfieldcounty.score.org website. Our next webinar is going to be tomorrow at noon, when Diane Winston will be speaking on networking resources for women and minorities. This is the fourth webinar in our 7-part series focused on assisting women and minority-owned businesses to start and grow their businesses. Please register for this webinar and other webinars in this series at fairfieldcounty.score.org. Again, SCORE offers free individual business counseling. So please go to our website and click Request a Mentor to get a free mentor. Also, please fill out your evaluations that have been sent to you at the end of the webinar. On behalf of SCORE, thank you very much, John, for presenting again today. And thank you to First County Bank and Singh for joining us today and sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. Hope you have a good day.